Would you be able to sail a boat without any training? I tried recently. I took an introductory sailing lesson, and it's amazing what they let you do. After a brief introduction, I was handed the tiller, pushed the sail out, and steered our small sailboat into the open water. Wow, sailing is easy, the intuitive part of my brain cheered, until my inner analyst chimed in, and potentially risky. The 4 stages of competence mirror this inner conflict between the two parts of our brains, the intuitive and the analytical. It's a back and forth we experience whenever we learn a new skill from scratch. Which part of our brain will take the lead? What are the 4 stages of competence? The 4 stages of competence are a learning model that describes the various psychological stages we go through when learning a new skill. Unconscious competence, ignorance, conscious incompetence, awareness, conscious competence, learning, and unconscious competence, mastery. Its origins can be traced back to management coach Martin M. Broadwell. He developed the model to describe different levels of teaching in the 1960s. Often portrayed as a hierarchy, Broadwell's description of 4 teachers who practice at varying levels of skill has since been adapted to apply to competence more broadly. We can define competence as the ability to perform a task successfully. We're competent if whatever we want to do has the expected outcome, or if whatever we produce actually works. As such, it complements the mind collection model, a typology of knowledge and the lack thereof, quite well. Let's see how the 4 stages would play out in a boating scenario. Our boat's captain has just passed out. Don't worry, he'll be fine. But someone has to take the wheel, and I'm afraid it has to be us. Stage 1, unconscious incompetence, ignorance. How hard can it be? It'll be fine. The first of the 4 stages of competence is a state of unconscious incompetence. We have no idea how to do something. Most likely, we're not even aware of all the things we don't know. This can be due to ignorance, willful blindness, or naivete. In the worst-case scenario, we don't believe that the skill in question is even a real skill, and therefore doesn't have to be learned. We probably take a lot of mental shortcuts, but our intuition is ultimately wrong. Frankly, in this condition, we're of no help to anyone. Suppose we're starting at this stage in our hypothetical boat scenario. We're very familiar with boats, having spent countless vacations on luxury cruises. But now, the safety of the entire crew and passengers is in our hands. Unfortunately, in the state of unconscious incompetence, extreme confidence is paired with total cluelessness. The Coast Guard is horrified by our inability to recognize that we need to learn how to navigate properly. Granted, you'd have to be pretty out of touch to think steering a boat through open waters isn't a big deal. But if we're honest with ourselves, there are quite a few activities where we're unconsciously incompetent. Sailing? Managing a restaurant? Teaching? What's there to know and learn anyway? It seems like if there's no urgent need to face our own ignorance, this stage can last forever or end quickly. Either way, once we move forward, we reach the stage of awareness. Stage 2, conscious incompetence awareness. Crikey, I have no idea what I'm doing. I better get learning. At the stage of conscious incompetence, we become aware of our ignorance. Coming to terms with what we don't know is a significant step to starting the learning process. Mind you, we still have no idea what we're doing, but the analytical part of our brain has taken over and is aware of our lack of skill. At least we're beginning to recognize our deficit and are willing to improve. Maybe by asking the right questions. Sitting at the boat's helm, it dawns on us how little to nothing we actually know about navigation and seamanship. Does the boat turn left or right when we move the rudder? What do all the blinking lights and instruments mean on the dashboard? How fast should we be going to avoid running aground? Is there such a thing as too fast on water? We've finally woken up from the slumber of ignorance. and the Coast Guard breathes a sigh of relief. We're now at the point where we know what we don't know. We have a clearer understanding of our limitations. At the same time, we shouldn't underestimate the realization that something can indeed be learned. The thought of something being unattainable can be a powerful deterrent from moving on to stage 3. Still, it's important to remember that we haven't yet acquired any new skills. That comes with conscious competence. Stage 3, conscious competence, learning. Wow, I actually know what I'm doing. Conscious competence is the third of the 4 stages of competence. We've finally learned something new. Now we actually understand what we're doing and can explain how and why something works. We analyze the situation we're in, and our analysis is correct. How did we get here? Through practice and experience. Consciously competent learners tend to function well as long as they can concentrate on the task at hand. Being in a conscious state of learning is certainly good news in the boat sailing scenario. We're getting the hang of steering the boat steadily through the water. We've learned from a few mistakes that, luckily, weren't catastrophic. We know our current location and how to navigate toward the next harbor. We're at the stage where we can teach others too. For instance, how to keep an eye on the compass and adjust the sails properly. That would allow us to focus on other tasks. With a bit of luck, we might even learn how to dock the boat smoothly, thanks to the patient folks at the Coast Guard. Obviously, this is a very useful stage to be in. It's where most of the work happens, but it's also where all of our growth comes from. Since they know what they're doing and why they do it, consciously competent people make good teachers. The Feynman technique, a learning method that promotes learning through teaching, is built on the very idea that conscious competence and the ability to teach are closely intertwined. Stage 4, unconscious competence, mastery. I don't know, I just do it. The final stage of our competence hierarchy is the psychological state of unconscious competence. As opposed to our dangerously wrong intuition at stage 1, our intuition is now 100% correct. There are many expressions for this state of mastery. We act from muscle memory. We're in the zone. We're Zen, as philosopher Alan Watts would describe it. Due to extensive practice and experience, we don't need to think about what we're doing anymore. We just do it. Now, there's no chance we will reach this stage while heroically rescuing our fellow passengers. We barely made it back to shore with the conscious competence we acquired on the water. But fast forward 5 years later, sailing has become second nature. It's like riding a bike. There's only one downside. How are we supposed to teach others how to sail if we don't know how and why we do what we do? Once we've achieved a high level of expertise, we run the risk of forgetting what it was like to learn something from scratch. We're cursed with knowledge, so to speak. That isn't to say that mastery isn't a beautiful thing. Of course not. As Robert Greene describes in The Daily Laws, once you've reached this level, it's almost as if the project is living inside of you. It's become a part of our authentic self. But what's left then? I guess we naturally push our skills to the next limit in order to discover new fields for growth. Perhaps we could apply for a job as a harbor master and get a sailing instructor license, just in case. Closing thoughts. I wouldn't think of the 4 stages of competence as linear or monolithic. There is a myriad of domains and skills within any given field of expertise. We seem to be moving back and forth between the stages as we discover our blind spots. Sometimes we may even be simultaneously ignorant about one aspect of a skill while having mastered another. Which brings us back to our initial question. Would you be able to sail a boat without any training? It seems like the answer highly depends on how fast the analytical part of your brain can take over. how quickly you can progress to a state of conscious competence in which you actually start to acquire the skills you need for the job. But perhaps we shouldn't think of it as a competition between two halves of our brains either. The faster the intuitive part of our brains and the analytical half make peace, the better.